In the winter of 1978, a monster storm sprung up in the United States Midwest, spitting snow, howling wind, and breathing an icy breath upon the land. This was no gentle snowfall. It was the mother of all blizzards. For 2 days, the world stood still. Roads vanished, houses became snow forts, hurricane-force winds and the bitter cold gripped the region. Nearly 100 lives were lost, most right here in Ohio, swallowed by the icy blizzard. During this devastating event, neighbors dug paths to each other's homes, sharing warmth, food, and goodwill, and frostbitten emergency workers bravely pushed through the storm, delivering food and rescuing those in need. So why is it that a man went out for his morning jog and found himself racing against the icy grips of Mother Nature? Today we look at the Great Blizzard of 1978 and the man who literally outran the storm. So if you're curious, let's take a run through history, I guess. In the early morning of January 26, 1978, Steve Gladys left his suburban Cleveland home to go for a run. What happened next was a frantic 11-mile race against Mother Nature as a ferocious blizzard pushed east, eager to swallow him whole. This was a crazy day for Steve, but before we can tell his story, we need to take a look at the storm itself. This colossal blizzard, now known as a bomb cyclone, shattered records as the barometric pressure plunged across the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes region. Meteorologists measured the strength of a storm by its barometric pressure. The lower the pressure, the stronger the storm. Cleveland logged a record low barometric pressure of 28.28, one of the lowest non-hurricane readings ever seen on mainland U.S. soil. In cities like Dayton and Columbus, wind gusts averaged 50 to 70 miles per hour, and there were even stronger gusts near Cleveland, where Category 1 hurricane gusts occurred. These powerful winds, coupled with rapidly plunging temperatures, created wind chills nearing 60 degrees below zero. Massive snowdrifts as tall as 25 feet left people stranded in their homes, in their cars, or at work. There were widespread power outages, and the entire length of the Ohio Turnpike was closed for the first time in its history. There are many stories that came from this storm, ranging from triumph to tragedy. Heroic tales like that of Jim Truly, a truck driver who was snowed into his cab on the highway outside of Mansfield, Ohio. He had stopped to help a fellow truck driver, then decided to wait out the storm, a decision that almost cost him his life. He eventually found himself stuck under a 20-foot snowdrift. He survived for 5 days on cigarettes and melted snow until the National Guard located him. There are also sad stories like that of 1-year-old Timothy Kimball, who froze to death in Newcastle, Indiana, after a stove used to heat his family's mobile home failed. His mother bundled him in blankets, and they set off for a neighbor's home through blinding snow, but she got lost. When she made her way back to the mobile home, she realized she had locked them both out. Timothy died of exposure before an emergency crew could arrive. And then there are the tales of the large increase of newborn babies occurring 9 months after the blizzard. It seems many couples were doing their best to stay warm. September is traditionally a big month for newborns due to the new year 9 months prior. But the end of September, or beginning of October of 1978, was a banner year for new deliveries. I hear the hospitals were standing room only. And there's also the mysterious death of Leslie Cooley, whose body was found by National Guard members in Dalton, Ohio, nearly 20 miles from his Massillon group home. How the 57-year-old ended up exposed to elements so far from home is still up for speculation, though there are some that are convinced he might have been walking to a doctor's appointment. Walking 20 miles in a blizzard to a doctor's appointment sounds extraordinary until you hear the story of Steve Gladys. In 2021, she and Hannon wrote an amazing article for Cleveland Magazine detailing the impact of the Great Blizzard in Northeast Ohio. I'll leave a link to that article in the description below so you can see for yourself. I'll also leave the links to the Curious History Patreon, merch shop, and our social media if you'd like to support the channel. Hannon's article is an impressive read that puts a great perspective on what the American Midwest suffered through in January of 1978. And in that article was the story of Steve Gladys. Gladys was an FBI agent assigned to the bank robbery squad in Cleveland and ran to work every day, roughly 11 miles from his home in Bay Village, to Cleveland's Federal Building downtown. Gladys began running during his training at the FBI Language School in Monterey, California. By the time he settled in Ohio, he had become so enamored with his new hobby that he co-founded the Cleveland West Roadrunners Club and began training to run in the Boston Marathon. Gladys knew running was good exercise, but it was good for work too. He was once quoted as saying his greatest dream was that some bad guy would start running from him and he would just let him run, knowing the bad guy would eventually get too tired to keep going and that he, Gladys, could run forever. On January 26, 1978, Gladys left his house on Humiston Drive at 4:30 a.m. and turned onto Lake Road for his usual run. It had snowed off and on in Cleveland since November, so the freezing temps and snow that morning were somewhat typical. But as he continued jogging east into Rocky River, it dawned on him that the snowstorm he was running through was far from ordinary. Gladys said it was like an explosion. It happened all at once. It went from nothing to a blizzard. It was like a Hollywood thing, like someone said, "Bring in the snow and turn on the fans." Cars were struggling to move on the snow-covered road beside him, and an increasingly strong wind blew at his back. After a few miles, he thought about turning around and heading back home, but then he decided that running into that wind would be impossible, so he just kept pressing on. After about 5 miles, the wind had pushed him so hard that he had seemingly outrun the storm, and for a moment, the air turned from freezing to what felt like a balmy 40 degrees. Gladys said it felt like summer in January, but this reprieve didn't last long. Soon Gladys would feel the fury of a 39-degree drop in temperature and rapid snowfall that began to bury Ohio. By the time he reached downtown, 6 inches of snow had fallen, and Gladys resembled a lost Arctic explorer with icicles hanging from his face. At first, his FBI co-workers didn't recognize him, and he had to flash his badge to get into the building. They just couldn't believe that he'd run all that way in a blizzard by accident. Steve's story of accidentally running through a blizzard became front-page news. He appeared on a local morning TV show days later, which was filmed outside, and the producers had him jog onto the set to the Rocky theme song. For a brief moment, Steve Gladys was a local celebrity, a bright spot in a treacherous 48 hours that gripped the United States Midwest. When he was asked why he ran 11 miles in a blizzard, Gladys stated, "I didn't mean to do it. I wouldn't do it again. The wind just took me." For those of you asking how it's possible that someone would go out for a run during an impending blizzard, remember this was 1978 and weather forecasting was very different than it is today. If you lived through the 70s, you'll remember a time where there was limited or no satellite images on your local news. Most weather maps were artistic renderings of the local region, drawn on a large board with colorful cutouts used to represent the sun, a cloud, rain, or snowflakes. And NEXRAD Doppler radar wasn't up and running until the first unit was installed in Norman, Oklahoma in 1990. To say most everyone was unprepared for a blizzard of this magnitude is a severe understatement. Today, Dr. Steve Gladys is the founder of Steve Gladys Leadership Partners, whose core services include executive coaching, leadership development, and motivational speaking. He is also an author and George Mason University professor. A pretty good resume for someone who accidentally went for a run in a blizzard. The Great Blizzard of '78 was a reminder of nature's fury and a testament to the will of the people who lived through it. But Mother Nature wasn't finished unleashing its fury on North America. In less than a week, a second blizzard of '78 would rock most of New England, as an extratropical cyclone would make its way up the eastern seaboard and bury many states in record snowfall. But that, my friends, is another story. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time as we explore more curious history. Take care.